So tax planning is great, but how do you actually get a tax return from a client?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Perfect RIA Podcast. I am your co-host, Matthew Jarvis, and with me, the man, the myth, the legend, Micah Shalansky. Micah, how are you, my friend?
Jarvis, I am doing excellent. Super excited. We are wrapping up Surge. Of course, by the time this airs, right, Surge will be done. But man, it's just been an amazing time to go through. I really enjoyed, of course, our Surge is always planned right before tax season, right before taxes are due. So we can get clients in so we can review their taxes and go through, which is kind of timely because that's what we're chatting about today
Yeah, it really is, Micah. And you and I talk about tax planning all the time. We talk
all
about
the
it
time.
from delivering massive value to clients. We talk about it for getting referrals from centers of influence. We talk about it in the prospect process and the lead process, how that it's a critical component of really all aspects of financial planning. And I haven't really ever, Micah, had somebody push back on that specifically. What I've gotten pushback on and what we want to talk about today is how do you actually get tax documents from clients and prospects? A lot of advisors have the experience of I ask my clients, I ask my prospects for their tax documents, and then for any number of reasons, I never actually see the documents.
Now, I want to do a shout out to our members too, and thank you for asking this question because sometimes we get to this point, or at least I do, and I don't mean this from an egotistical way, but I'm so used to getting tax returns, I forget that this is even the first step in the question
Yes.
about saying, no, we need to get the tax return first so we can add value because it's just such on autopilot with our team, our entire team. And this is the point I think you want to get to. Your team is getting the tax returns,
Mhm.
you're never even having to ask for them. This is part of the process from the word go.
Yep. And part of that, Micah, we talk about you and I have been doing this for a lot of years. When it comes to prospects or clients or anybody, when you and I talk to a client, it's not like, hey, would you please provide us with your tax return?
Mm.
It's like, hey, where's your tax return? Right. It's like, when you fly, I just flew back from Texas this weekend. They didn't say, hey, Mr. Jarvis, would you please mind putting your seatbelt on? It's like, no, put your seatbelt on. Like it's not a question, it's not a negotiation thing. And for us, it becomes the same thing. But early in your career, it can, or if you've not ever asked for documents before, let's say you're 20 years into your career and this is a new thing, and you approach clients and prospects with uncertainty, like, hey, would you mind giving us your tax documents? Then they're going to have an equal amount of uncertainty.
Now, one of the things that I'll push back on as well, as our members know, I'm building a house right now, right? So I'm doing with all the joys of contractors and then construction loans, et cetera. And whenever the bank comes to me and asks for a document, my general answer is no. Now, I know that they have the money, yada, yada, yada. It's the same thing I tell clients, but my general answer is no, because I do not see a clear benefit for me providing this document with building my house and getting the loan.
Mhm.
I'm like, you don't need this,
Yep.
right? You don't need a P&L every month. Shut up and just do them, give them the money and move on, right?
Yep.
Now, as irrational as that may seem when you're listening to that, I'm going to argue this is the same thing our clients are feeling as well when you ask them for a document, any document, I'm not just talking taxes, right? Anything. It could be a statement, it could be a pay stub, it could be a tax return, anything. If it's not directly, if they do not see how it's directly related to them achieving their goals, they are not inclined to get you that information.
Micah, that's a great comparison because you think of a lot of our respective clients, we don't even have to ask them for their tax return. The second they get it done, they bring it in. Now, that's not every client, but for those clients, for
Right.
the clients who bring it in automatically, and for the ones that don't, Micah, goes to your point, they either see it value or they don't. So the ones that aren't providing you their tax return, the value is not clear to them, right? Why they're looking, why would I go through the hassle of getting this guy a copy? Why would I potentially expose my information to new people? Why would I even want to think about taxes between now and next year? So, and this is where kind of our Jocko extreme ownership. If your clients and prospects aren't providing you your tax return, it's because you, Mr. and Mrs. Advisor, have not clearly articulated the value in a way that makes sense to them.
Okay, so step one of doing this process, right, and getting clients tax return is to create a process, right?
Yes.
What is your process for getting the tax return and getting your team on board? I wouldn't go directly to the clients and start asking them this without bringing your team up to speed
Mhm.
because then the client's going to call and says, "Well, I need to give Mike my tax return." Then the RM is going to be like, "Well, why? Oh, okay. Why does he need your tax return?" And the client's like, "Well, I don't know why they need my tax return." Right. So the first step in all of these processes is you got to work with your team. You got to iron it out. How are you going to get the returns? How are
Mhm.
you going to communicate it to the client? Why does your team needs to know why it's beneficial for you to have it as well, right? So this is going to start with internally first, getting this process in place before we move it to clients. Jarvis, is that fair?
Micah, that's a really good point to bring up. Not only do you have to have team buy-in for all those reasons that you mentioned, but it lets you also practice explaining this value, right? This is a very friendly audience who, for better or worse, have to listen to your crazy
Your
ideas
jokes.
for your jokes or whatever. This is your time. If the team is saying, "Hey, I don't know, this sounds like a lot of work," okay, we've got a buy-in issue. We need to start there.
Now, with our team as well, when we get the tax returns, we actually take it to the next step, which is we get the key information from the tax return and we enter it into our CRM so we have this data, right? Now, if you think about this from a staff perspective, this is a lot of work. They got to get the return, they got to know how to look at the return, so we have to educate them on that. Then they have to get the data and they have to manually put it into the CRM until we can get a simple automated way to do this. So again, this is a pretty big ask that you're asking for your team that's already doing a lot. So really come in with the why. So Jarvis, what is the why? Let's hit this real fast. Is what's the why? Why do you need the client's tax return? Why is it beneficial to get it? Why should you have these numbers?
Yeah. A why that like to give the team is I say, team, do you remember when so and so client called last week and they wanted 50,000 from their IRA and you nor they knew how much should be withheld for taxes? Oh yeah, I totally remember this. Right now it's a pain point that's applicable to them. Cool. By having their tax return, we can then put in the CRM how much needs to be withheld from distributions. So right there, I'm connecting it to a pain point that they experience all the time. Client says they want $10,000. The team doesn't know how much to hold back in taxes. Cool. And now we know that. So that's directly connected to them. And then I take a little bit step back further and I say, listen, by having their tax return, it lets us deliver more value to them, which lets us keep them as a client, which gets us more referrals and so forth.
I love it. Jarvis, I think that's brilliant. It connects it directly to them. The other one that I like to throw in there with our ops team as well, I love the distributions, but how many times do we have to go back to clients, and they have to do an amended return because they missed an RMD, right? They didn't miss the RMD, they missed putting on their tax return, or they didn't put all the interest and dividends, etc. These are things that we get to review. And how much value is that to a client if we get to catch these things before the IRS does?
Yep.
And the team's like, you know what? That's a huge benefit that we can add.
Mike, another example I give to the team members, but also to clients themselves, which we'll talk about in just a second, is being able to kind of reconcile or compare the tax return to the information we know. Now, I used to tell clients more often, hey, we're here to catch mistakes, but I wanted to be careful to not imply that I could catch all mistakes, right? If they're W-2 from wherever didn't report, I can't catch that. So say that we can compare your information to the information that we have to make sure that it's accurate. And team and then advisors and clients, we've caught mistakes ranging from tens of thousands of dollars to Micah. Earlier this year, we caught a mistake that was an $800,000 mistake on the client's
Wow.
tax return. Their 401k rollover had been coded incorrectly on the tax return. $800,000
Right.
mistake. So these aren't
And this
little things. Go ahead, Micah.
And this was a return that a CPA did, correct?
This one was actually I've had it done. I had a $400,000 one a few years ago that the CPA had
Okay.
done because the 1099 was incorrect from the plan custodian. They just
Fascinating.
added the data in and nobody thought to ask why the client took this distribution. By the way, Micah,
Right.
on that one, the client had done that. They had paid the taxes on this, the hundred
Oh,
and
so
fifty
brutal.
thousand dollars in taxes.
Right.
No one had
Right.
said anything. We get a copy of the tax return. I'm reviewing it. I about fall out of my chair and
Right.
and we got it fixed and we amended the return. They got their money back. The
Oh, the
800
first reason you fell out of your chair because 'cause you're like, "Oh, crap, we screwed up a rollover,"
how did we
right?
do
That's the
this?
first thing that goes through your head.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the $800,000 one, he was doing his own return, but
Gotcha.
still, the mistake was there. So we can stress, hey, we're an extra set of eyes on this thing.
So this is a dishwasher rule right
Yes.
here, which I want to get to, right? So this is why I like having a checklist. You should have a checklist that goes through and says, great, we're going to review 37 things on your tax return. Now, the way I like to present this to clients is to go through and says, you know what, Bob and Sue, John does a great job doing your taxes every year. He does fantastic. Our benefit of reviewing this is two things. One, we get to see you a little bit more frequently, and I know a little bit more what's going on financially. So I want to make sure I'm looking at your return. In fact, we look at 37 different things on your tax return because I want to make sure from our perspective that things are set up correctly. So that's the first thing we want to do. The second thing is John does a great job looking in the rearview mirror about preparing your taxes for last year, but my job is to look through that windshield, right? My job is to look at the next 10 years and to say, great, what do we need to do in the next 10 years to help lower your tax bill? And really, your tax return helps me a lot with that. Is that going to be okay?
I love that.
Who says no to that?
Yeah. Now, Mark, a part of that checklist, that process is how are clients going to logistically get the tax return to you?
Sure.
How are they going to? And so you just need to think about this by just groups of clients. Some of our clients, we say, hey, just bring them in during surge, bring them into your next client meeting. Others, we say, hey, stop by the office and we'll make a copy. Others have a PDF and we can say, here's the link to our secure portal. Go ahead and upload those documents to the portal. Others still have friendly CPAs and we can say, hey, just forward this email to the CPA or I'm going to email the CPA. They're going to want your permission and then they'll send me a copy of the return.
Yeah, so knowing that, having your relationship manager know that is going to be key.
Mhm.
Jarvis threw something in there that I want to make sure we're pulling out right there. He said, when you you're not asking the client to email the tax return. You
Mhm.
email them the link to the portal, right?
Yes.
Don't email them and say, go upload it. That's not adding any value because they don't know where the link is. They forgot what the name of it's called because everyone is different. And so they're just going to email you the tax return. Now that's a security issue. So anytime you're requesting a document for them to upload, you put the link in the email when it goes out.
Micah, can I stress something right here, which is if you're emailing your clients asking them for their tax return and they don't send them, and you email them again and they don't send them, and you email them again and they don't send them, stop emailing them. This is not,
I would say with 4 emails, you got to do the fourth one, right? Come on, just got to keep going.
stop emailing them. If this, and this is for tax returns, it's for everything. If this channel of
Yes.
communication is not delivering the results you intended, it's the wrong channel. This is where after the second or third email, your team is getting on the phone with them. Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Client, Matthew really wanted me to check, make sure you've got your tax return because want to check for 37 potential areas of mistake, want to make sure we're planning ahead for this year, want to make sure we're planning for RMDs in a couple of years. Can I walk you through the process of getting this to us? Can I send you a prepaid envelope and you can mail it to the office and we'll scan it
Yep.
in and we'll send it back to you? Don't keep beating that same drum, please.
Yeah, our office rule is 2 emails. That's
I
it.
love it.
2 emails, and then you pick up the phone and you call the client, right? So if that's one email back, the client responds, then you respond back. That's it. Any other question from the client, any other failure to move forward in progress, that is picking up the phone and calling. This is super, super important.
Love it. I love it. So, Micah, the client sends in the tax return or the prospect sends in the tax return. I think here's the other mistake that advisors make that I've made in the past, which is it goes into their file and then it just sits. And eventually, when we get a client meeting or we're doing a value add, we go back and can look on that. But it's become too far detached for the client. I sent Micah my tax return and nothing happened, right? This goes back to the dishwasher rule. When we get the tax return, we want to make sure that we're taking action right away and setting the expectation for when we're going to take action again.
Yes, very, very important in that. So in our process, right, that was the first thing that we talked about. You got to create a process for this. After we get the tax return, it gets inputted into the system and it gets flagged by the advisor to review. And so there's a task out there. Then what my RMs do, because I don't like tasks because I don't like people telling me what to do. So they put it on my calendar because mentally that's fine with me. So they put it on my calendar for me to review tax returns. And again, time management, right? I do these in bulk. They create a whole list of returns for me to review. They get links to them. So all I got to do is click on that appointment link. I click on the link. It brings me to the client tax return. Then right in there, underneath that in the notes, I'm firing in everything the client needs to do in their tax return, right? Perfect. This looks great. We've reviewed the 37 things. Everything is fantastic, right? Or saying, hey, I don't think the QCD was in there. Looks like the rollover was misflagged. Or, you know what? The client is very charitable. Next year, they're 70 and a half. I want to start QCDs. Let's talk about that. What we just found one, the client missed 2 RMDs on their tax return, like literally just before this podcast. We pulled
Wow.
that one up. They missed 2 RMDs. Great news is we did the RMDs. They just didn't put it on their tax return. So that was the oh crap moment for me.
Yeah.
But RMDs were processed, but they didn't put it on their tax return. So great news, they're going to get a refund, right? Because we had taxes withheld. So I'm going to find all of those things. And then my RMs are going to take that and then they're going to go back and send an email to the client summarizing my notes. Number one, they're going to spell things correctly. So that's a huge value add right there. But then they're also going to have it in just a nice little format that's there. So this frees up my time versus if I had to pull up an email to every client, be like, all right, what's going on with Bob and Sue? Let's think about this, right? It's just going to take longer and I'm not going to add as much value versus if I'm in the groove of reviewing tax returns, I just want brass tax notes going in there. My RM team is going to pick that up and now deliver that to the client.
Mike, I want to pull out a couple of productivity efficiency things that you mentioned there almost in passing, but these are critical when we look at the distinction between advisors that are running highly effective, highly efficient, scalable practices. The two things that you mentioned that I really drew up. One, you said your team had a list of the tax returns you needed to look at, and there was links on that list. Now, you might think, listener, saying, that's not really a big deal. All Micah would have to do is have the list of names, log into the CRM, type in their name, click the link to their client file, pull it up. And so you say, well, that's only 4 steps. Maybe that's 30 seconds, but it's about 400 chances for Micah to get distracted and say, hey, maybe I'll look through the notes. Maybe I'll do this. Maybe I'll check my email in between. So it's not just the time savings, which is huge. It's I want to avoid any chances that I'm going to get distracted while I'm on that project.
I also, Jarvis, you're 100% correct. I also want to get the team earmarked for the most efficient use of my time,
Mm-hmm.
right? Of saying, how do they get better at getting the most value out of Micah? Because if I'm distracted and I'm not paying attention and I'm not really answering their question, they're not getting the most value out of that time. How do we focus it when they're coming into my office? What is everything they need to have ready to get the most value out of Micah at that time to answer all of their questions to deliver the most value to them and to the clients? So this is a continual process.
Yeah, sounds a lot like Parkinson's law, by the way. Something
Hmm, fancy how that
that we talk
works.
about all the time. On the note of tax returns, and Micah, you and Steven are going to talk about this. Steven Jarvis, CPA, are going to talk about this a lot this week in the RTS Power session.
Thanks.
But I'm trying to think, when was the last time you looked at a tax return, Micah, and you couldn't find a spot to deliver value or at least flex the dishwasher rule?
Oh, and not flex the dishwasher rule,
Well,
boy.
or
Yeah,
yeah, not be able to
yeah,
either
or
deliver
flex,
value or
boy.
flex the dishwasher rule.
I'd really have to go back some time. All of the returns, I'm commenting on something positively that's going to be there. Even simple ones. They got 2 pensions and Social Security, right? And no RMDs coming in yet. We're always talking about it. Jarvis, oh, here's an easy one. I was talking to a client the other day, and we were talking about the dishwasher rule. The return was great. They were putting everything in place, but they were making quarterly tax payments because they prefer to do that versus withholdings, whatever works for the client. And I said, hey, just a reminder. I know we talked about this before, but when you're making your quarterly tax payments, and she got so excited, she interrupted me. She's like, oh, no, Micah, I do it. I do it. You told me this, and it's great because the first payment I end in 1, the second payment
I
I end
love
in
it.
2, the third payment I end in 3, right? And she's like, this makes it so easy to track. I love it every time I write those checks. Now imagine the client's experience, right? From making quarterly tax payments, which is a pain in the butt, she actually likes this because now she has a mental hack to track how these payments go through. So it can be very easy things like that, but they deliver so much value to the clients.
Boy, Mike, we could do an entire podcast on this. You've changed something, the estimated payments, which could feel like a burden. It could feel like a have to. It could feel like I'm out of control on this. To the client now has control. Now their control is limited to the last dollar of the payment. That's okay. You've still given them control in this situation where before they had none. Not to keep beating this drum, on the RTS webinar this week, there is a handout that you and Stephen have that is a client-friendly guide to making estimated tax payment that,
Oh,
Micah,
it's
we
so
print
helpful.
out. We have our Jarvis Financial logo on it. We print it out and give it to any client doing estimated payments. We give them that guide so that they have something tangible to remember. Oh, that's right, the last dollar. That's right, I shouldn't send a check. I should log in. And here's the screenshots of the login process.
The other thing, and we're going to talk about this in the webinar too, the other
Yep.
thing that our team will do whenever we're giving that out at the very last of it says, or excuse me, at the very beginning of it, the email when we send it says, if you have any problems with this, let us know. We'll do a share screen and walk you through it. Right. So if the client's coming with any problem whatsoever, we'll do a Zoom. They're on their computer. We're just doing screen share and we're going to walk them through every step.
I love it. Five-star tip on this. Man, we could just, I love, Mike and I took a break from recording episodes because we were in Surge. So excited to be back in this. Steven has a video where he's doing a walkthrough of the online
Oh, so
payment
great.
portal, which you could use as an advisor, right? Here's a CPA we use, you can use, or five-star tip, you go through and do it yourself. Now, you need to be careful. You need to know how to do this. A Loom video is perfect for this because you can always go back and delete it. Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Client, here's a quick walkthrough of how to use this portal. And it's me walking through how to use the portal. Now, I'm doing this carefully, so I'm not typing in my social security number on the recorded screen, but you can get that with some screenshots and so forth. Incredible value add here. Whereas, what does the
Huge.
CPA do, Micah? Here's the paper voucher to fill in your, and half the time the dollar amount's not, or it's a completely made up dollar amount.
Oh, it's just software generating it. It's no relate in those quarterly tax payments that the software comes up is
Yep.
not related at all to the client achieving any of their goals
No.
whatsoever. And the clients don't even understand it. They're like, well, I owed 5 grand. How come I'm making $3,000 in quarterly payments?
Yeah.
Like this doesn't even make any sense. Yeah.
Yeah, that number is the protected estimate, which may or may not be relevant to them. So it just, I guess, I know we're going deep on this, but there's so many places here to demonstrate and to deliver massive value on just the tax rate. We haven't even talked, by the way, Micah, about any actual tax
Mm-mm,
strategies. We're just talking
mm-mm.
about, are you reviewing to make sure their information is correct? Are you highlighting where you've helped them and where they're taking action based on your recommendations? This is amazing value add here.
I love it. One of the things, I'm sorry, I'm just on my soapbox on
Yes.
this, Jarvis, just going through it. I want to make sure we're talking about on those quarterly tax payments when
Yes.
clients are making them, right? One of the big things that I love to do, my why do they end them in 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? Because it seems like such a trivial thing. One of the things I'll ask, has the IRS ever lost one of your tax payments you've made? And they're, oh my gosh, yes, they lost it and it was a nightmare to find it and da 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 da. And I said, you know what? Unfortunately, that happens. And it's happening even more right now because the IRS is so behind. Now, by lost payment, what that really means, and tell me if I'm wrong, but they took your money and deposited. They just didn't credit to your account. Then they sent you an Instagram said you owed more money. They're like, that's exactly what happened, Micah, because it's happened to me, right? I know this. This is great. Here's the hack in which we're going to do. Because when the IRS takes that, we don't know which out of the 4 payments they lost because they're all for $1,000.
Yep.
So we're going to change the last dollar amount in each one. And then all of a sudden, when we see the deposits and we see 1,001, 1,002, and 1,004, right? And we know they lost that third payment, we can find it super easy, let the IRS know, and it's going to make it a lot less painful. Is that going to be okay? they're elated because we've taken a real life pain point and solved it.
We could take this another step further, right? Your clients that have to make estimated payments, right? That you can't do other withholdings, et cetera. We'll set those aside. You need to have a process in your CRM to remind them the week before
Yes.
it's due, a week before it's due, a quick email. Hey, just a reminder, estimated payments coming up. Here's our video. Here's our printout guide. If you need any help at all with this, let us know. We're really glad to help. What CPA has ever done that? Let me give you a hint. It's none of them, right? So
None.
you're delivering this value that no one else. You're not competing with the CPA here. You're delivering value that they've never experienced before.
One of the things I'm going to throw a shout out to Fidelity and Schwab and like all those other guys, because I'm sure you're keen to listen to every podcast that we drop. I would love it in our systems is from a non-qualified account if we could push tax payments to the IRS,
Yep.
right? There's other issues you need to figure out with the SEC, but if you would do that for me, that would be amazing value add, right? Imagine if we could just set up those quarterly tax payments on our end, super easy, or in just like a withholding from an IRA distribution, we can make withholding from a non-qualified account and we could send that money to the IRS. Oh my gosh, that would be great.
Well, that would be. Well, we're going to end the episode here. We'll go advocate for the next 40 years to get the custodians to change
Since
that.
that will never change. Sorry about that.
Mike, stepping back a little bit off this, so I want advisors who don't feel versed in taxes to realize
Yes.
that you can deliver so much value without having this incredibly deep knowledge. Now, there's a lot of value to having incredibly deep knowledge, but you don't have to go straight to the deep end. These little things like making sure their information is correct on their tax return, giving them
Right.
the estimated tax payment guide. These are things, even if you're in a super strict compliance environment, almost every compliance environment I've seen will let you hand them a third party piece. Hey, we found this piece from Retirement Tax Services on estimated tax guides. Just want to give this to you as a value add. Perfect.
Yeah.
If you can
CPA
white
that
label it,
created it.
great. Yeah, please.
And one of the things too, I'm going to pick on Christian, my junior in the
Yes.
office, who's doing a phenomenal job, and he came in with virtually zero tax knowledge in the business, right?
Sure.
Yes, he has a CFP, but really no tax knowledge outside of that, and that was one of his big concerns. Is holy crap, I got to review. He had to review like 150 tax returns this surge, and so he had to review a ton of returns. He's like, how am I actually going to do this? And it's simple. We're going to create a checklist, and this is how you're going to review every single tax return. And it's amazing, kind of 80, 100 into him. He's like, you know what? We're getting the hang of this. Now, is he a tax expert? By no means yet, right? He's working that direction. But one of the things is he can add so much value to clients and meetings because he knows what to look for because we work in a niche, right? So he doesn't have to know everything about the tax code. You don't have to know everything about the tax code. We got to know things that are appropriate to your clients. So we get to narrow the entire tax code to 30 to 40 things that we need to be watching for in a client's return to deliver massive value.
Oh, Micah, I love it. There's so much opportunity here. Micah, you if we pivot just a little bit to how this
Let's go
applies
for it.
to prospects. And so we talked about advisors a lot of times. Well, two things: how it applies to prospects, and then what Micah advisors should do who have never requested tax documents before. So this is a hurdle to tackle. With prospects, they don't know any differently. So I'm just gonna tell them this is what you need to bring. In fact, I don't tell them. My team sends them a list.
Right.
Here are the 7
Right.
documents you need to have for our meeting: investment statements, estate documents, last 2 years tax returns. If for some reason you can't have these documents together before our meeting, please let us know and we'll reschedule that depending on the situation. So we're just going to tell them it's a given. Now, I've had prospects, Micah, say, wait a second, I'm interviewing 4 advisors and none of the other 3 have asked for my tax return. And I say, really? Because by the way, in my heart of hearts, my mind is blown that there's anyone calling themselves an advisor
Right.
not doing tax plan. So I can in my heart's
Right.
heart say, really? That really surprises me. How are they going to make sure you're not overpaying taxes in retirement? How are they going to tell you how much to withhold in taxes when you claim Social Security? How are they going to tell you if you should be doing IRA contributions or Roth contributions? Mr. and Mrs. Prospect, I just can't believe this. Are you sure they didn't ask? And now I'm head and shoulders above everyone else.
Yeah, I got so giddy when you said that, right? Because I
Yes.
love that aspect in the competition side when there's other advisors that are out there as well. I just had one this last week. They were interviewing Fisher, they were interviewing someone on the East Coast, and then myself, right? All right, well, Fisher, they're just a money manager. They don't do, from anything I've seen, they don't do financial planning. Clients don't know that, by the way, right?
No,
Because financial planning means all of us. But we asked for their tax return, and that was the biggest thing that they brought up, Jarvis, in this meeting was saying, well, why did you want our tax return? Because we already have a CPA that does this. And I found a glaring error on their tax return. So number one, I was able to find some massive value just in a quick conversation with them. They were missing something in their tax return.
Cool.
And then number two, they were getting this first supplement, basically this extra Social Security income that they're not eligible for. And I said, so when you talk to Fisher and you talk to this other advisor, did they mention anything to you about kind of, this penalty on the first supplement? They're like, no, they didn't mention anything. It's fascinating,
Huh.
and I was able to walk through their benefits, and basically they got to repay a whole bunch of benefits they're not entitled to because I had the tax return and because I could see this, right? There's a clear separation now. And the end of the call, she's like, no, we're just moving forward with you, right? Because we didn't hold back. I'm so on a soapbox of this. We didn't hold back and say, well, you got to come back in and I'll tell you the secret answers after you hire me. It's like, no, these are problem points. Hire me or not, you need to go fix these things.
I want to highlight one little small thing, Mike, and then let's pivot to client or advisors that are changing gears. Sometimes, Micah, when you and I are describing these things on the podcast, we get really excited. And if I'll confess, we get a little bit snarky with some of this stuff.
Sure, fair
Never,
enough.
never in a prospect meeting are we snarky about this.
Mm-mm.
Never are we
I don't.
facetious. Never are we sarcastic. And it's sincere. It's not a marketing sales thing. It's from my heart of
Mm-mm.
hearts. Mr. and Mrs. Prospect, there's a mistake has been made on your first supplement. We have to get this fixed. Whether you work with me or not, you've got to get this fixed. This is coming from a place of pure authenticity. So I just wanted to highlight that you and I get really
Yes.
excited when we're on this. We're like, oh, gee whiz, I can't believe this is going on. That's not ever how we would talk to a client or prospect.
Yeah, in my mind, I get a little irritated at the other advisors, right? Because
Yes.
I'm like, how did you miss this? It's
Mhm.
so glaring, right? But again, to your point, does that add any value to the client? Absolutely not, right? We need to deliver that value. So thank you for drawing
Yeah,
that out,
I
Travis.
just want to highlight that. Okay, Mike, advisors who have never asked for tax returns before, how
Yes.
how do you shift that gear? Now you've got not only all these things we've mentioned already, but the client saying, "Wait, you've never asked for my tax return before. What's happened? Why were you missing something before?" Which is our head trash, right?
Oh, totally, right? Because we didn't ask for it, we should never ask for anything. Because it's the way we've always done it, we should never change to anything new because that way we're safe and we don't look incompetent, right?
That's right.
Okay, no, obviously we know that's not the case. You know what, Jarvis? I love your CD player analogy, really, that you give out with clients. Walk us through that one.
Yeah, I've used this when I'm doing fee increases, when we added a junior advisor, when we're changing investment models. I say, Mr. and Mrs. Client, do you remember when you bought your first CD player? Now, by the way, if you work with really young people, you'll have to think of a different example, but this works for me. And they'll say, yeah, it was so much better than tape decks. And we kind of wax nostalgic about that. Mr. and Mrs. Client, when was the last time you used a CD player? I don't. I haven't for years. Perfect. When we recommended this, when we started working together, that was the best thing available. Like the CD player is the best thing available. Now there are better things available, and this is the new way. So I'm always going to recommend for you the best options for you. We're always on the lookout for things that will do a better job. This is now the best way. And they say, perfect. Wow. Thank you so much, Matthew. We weren't even aware that this had changed.
And how I would apply that on the tax side of the equation is saying, you know what, I know your CPA is doing a phenomenal job of
Mhm.
preparing your tax return, and if because I really believe that, right? Because if I didn't believe that, I'd be telling him to change CPAs, or you do a great job preparing your tax return every year, but now as the laws change, then it's something that we want to help review to make sure you stay on top of it. And we have 37 things we want to make sure, and we need to talk about our tax planning. So I like to couch it in two ways.
Mhm.
One, I love that CD player analogy, right?
Mhm.
What has changed, right, in reviewing the tax return? And then number two, we need to do tax planning. Because look, if Congress does, this is my only political joke that I'll
Yep.
say in meetings, right? I'll say, look, if Congress does nothing, of which they're good at, tax laws in 3 years expire and your taxes go up. That we know. That's the law today. So if we know taxes are going to be higher in the future, does it make more sense to pay taxes today at a lower rate or tomorrow at a higher rate? Well, today at a lower rate. Great. The only way I know that for sure is if I have your tax return. I got to look at that and I got to be looking forward into tax planning in the future to make sure you're not overpaying in taxes.
Yep. One other line I'd use on that is say, boy, Mr. and Mrs. Client, I've been working with clients for the last 13 years, however many years it is for you. And what I've noticed is for almost all of my clients, their biggest single expense is their tax bill. Because of that, I have now been trained extensively on taxes through the Perfect RA, through Retirement Tax Services, through Ed Slot, through whatever. And now I am able to help make sure that you're not overpaying the IRS in retirement. So we're
I love
positioned
it.
it not, I wasn't dropping the ball before. We've just found a better way. We're now at the next level. So don't let that scare you. And Micah, if we had time, we would jump into a whole soapbox on this is a great way to deliver more value in preparation for your fee increase and the $250,000 challenge, which we'll unveil in June, I believe.
Ooh, sneak peek on that one. All right.
Ooh.
So this podcast is all about action items. So let's go ahead and jump into some action items. And Jarvis, I'm going to say the first action item is you need to create a process. You need
Mhm.
to create a process. Now, don't let this be such an elaborate process that you never get around to doing it. That was pointless, right? But make a simple 7, 9 step process. This is great. How are you going to get the return? Who's going to handle it? How are you going to walk through that? And if you don't know how to do that, then you need to jump on the Retirement Tax Service Power Session for the webinar coming up, because we're going to talk about that.
I love that. And it doesn't even have to be in your CRM. Ideally, it is. This could be an Excel document that you're tracking it
Yep.
on. This could be, but it needs to be a process. Micah, you mentioned the Retirement Tax Services Power Session. You go to retirementtaxservices.com/welcome to sign up for the power session this week with Stephen and with Micah. Among other
Woohoo!
things, they're going to go through that 37-point checklist. They're going to go through the letter that we send to clients to get them to send their tax return. They're going to go through that estimated tax payment guide. They're going to go through tax birthdays, milestones. Mike, I don't know how you're going to get all this in 60 minutes, but I am excited.
I don't know. We're just gonna fly. Oh, come on. It's like a CPA and me about taxes. We're just gonna geek out for an hour. It's gonna be so funny. And by the way, 5-star tip: I tell clients I geek out about taxes, and I get giddy and excited just like this, and they laugh. They call me a nerd, and they're like, "Micah, I'm so glad we have you to geek out in taxes." And I'm like, "What? You don't read tax code on the weekend?" Because I do. And this is I literally do on the weekend when there's something new that comes out. I will read tax code. I find this fascinating. I share that with my clients.
Yeah. Last action item I would put on there, Micah, feel free to add another one, is you got to get your tax returns from every client and every prospect. This has to be a
Yep.
non-negotiable. It has to be like buckling your seat on the
Yes.
airplane,
Yep.
getting your blood pressure drawn at the office at the doctor's office. This is a must-have. You're doing this egregious disservice to your clients and your firm if you're not having a tax focus.
Amen. You got to get it done. Perfect. Guys, as always, until next time, happy planning.
Happy planning.